Guitar Co-op Podcasts. Great composers. Conceived and presented by Fabio Zanon. Guitar scores, for the most part, don't have that many expression marks. Before the 20th century, most composers wrote the notes and a few instructions telling the guitars whether to play slow or fast, loud or soft, and that was it. There are reasons for this. First and foremost, the profile of guitar music buyers 200 years ago. But if we compare any guitar piece with, say, a Chopin piano piece, it's obvious that he considered these symbols of performance and expression to be part of the essence of the music. They are not just cosmetic cues. He changes the understanding of phrases and harmony with these carefully considered nuances. Until at a certain point, I came across for the first time a volume of scores by Mertz, a composer I only knew from a couple of collected works. You are listening to Song Without Words by Josef Kaspar Mertz, and that's me playing in the album Romantic Guitar released by Guitarcoop. By the way, if you want to listen to our playlist, you just have to access it in the description of this episode. Mertz's music clearly belongs to the High Romantic period from the mid-1830s and 1840s. But what immediately caught my attention was the generosity with which he distributed instructions that guided the performer's own sensitivity. These scores not only indicated where to play loud, soft, accentuate, hold a note, or gradually increase the speed, they also include expressive cues such as heroic, lugubrious, with bravura, volante, and even rare ones like zeffiroso, meaning to play as if playing with a gentle breeze. What's most interesting about this type of indication is that it's quite subjective. If the composer wants a passage to be played heroically, what does that mean? Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it louder or softer or more articulate? Is it with a steady rhythm or a loose rhythm? This points to a fundamental trait of romantic virtuosity, theatricality. This is Edson Lopes playing Polacca, Opus 5 No. 3 by Mertz. It's another release by Guitar Co-op. It's not possible to simply play heroically or exaltedly. The performer must, like Caesar's wife, to appear heroic or exalted. He must embody the character. Often this emotion can only be conveyed visually rather than audibly. In the 19th century, the guitar struggled to embody the role of a vehicle for virtuosity. Here, Mertz attempts to expand the guitar's scope through a purely subjective device. But what is virtuosity? To speak of virtuosity in music is to cross the line that separates music as text from music as performance, from music as an object to music as an event. This public use of music is linked to a true revolution in technology and consequently in technical skills and in the use of public spaces. 19th century bourgeois society was obsessed with the cult of personality and the individual. The cult of Napoleon fueled the metaphor of the artist as a heroic individual in the intellectual sphere, but with military connotations. It is no coincidence that the first great virtuoso in the modern sense was a violin player, Niccolò Paganini. String instrument bows are made of Pernambuco, the only wood that combines lightness, elasticity, and stability in the right proportions. The invention of the concave Brazil wood or Pernambuco bow in the 18th century changed the history of music and allowed for the creation of a lasting cultural icon, the virtuoso embodied in Paganini. His bow not only allowed to create music with greater power and speed, or with passages that challenge the limits of human possibilities, but it also resembled a sword. The most common metaphors used by the press at the time when referring to Paganini's performance were that he resembled a general leading his soldiers, and the violin sounded like a female voice as he played it with his bow that resembled a commanding sword. The phallic association is comically obvious. Franz Liszt, who was one of the first and greatest virtuosos of the Romantic piano, captured the message and transposed it to his treatment of the piano, which in his works sounds like an army division. Music became a spectacle, a show, and shows presuppose an audience. This led to an explosion in the number and importance of public concerts. The pop music of today only exists because Paganini and Liszt once existed. And how did guitar fit into this? Poorly. The guitar had no way of using those metaphors. It is not played with a bow, the hand movements are very small and subtle, it doesn't speak loudly or harshly, the notes burst into the air and quickly disappear, and fast passages are negotiated with difficulty. In other words, it's not a spectacular instrument. Therefore, at that time it was only well accepted in domestic settings and it was seen as an amateur activity. The great virtuosos we have heard in previous episodes, such as Fernando Sor or Giuliani, were always, invariably, criticized for putting so much talent and effort into a deficient, inferior, and amateurish instrument. However, in their time, as today, this inferiority appealed to a sufficient number of followers because of the qualities that are not so apparent in the violin and piano: intimacy, sweetness, and tenderness, and of course the perception of something incorruptible, unspectacular, and uncommercial. Giuliani's post-Napoleonic Vienna began to bring the guitar into this aesthetic and seek a synthesis in which the instrument was simultaneously treated as a vehicle for virtuosity without losing its genuine qualities. This led to the guitar's tactile qualities, especially its ability to play beautifully sounding melodies and fast up and down arpeggios. Mertz arrived at a moment of transcending what Giuliani had done. He created a spectacle of sublime musical gestures and facial expressions, combining hearing with sight. His music explores kind of a flow of emotions without conforming to pre-established forms and embraces much of the new rhetoric employed by Paganini, Liszt, and his contemporaries. This style of performance was beyond the reach of amateur guitarists. Josef Kaspar Mertz, our composer of the month, was born on August 17, 1806, in what was then called Pressburg, in the Kingdom of Hungary, as part of the Austrian Empire. Nowadays it's Bratislava, the capital city of Slovakia. If you're familiar with any of Mertz's music, you might be surprised to hear the name Josef. All modern editions call him Johann or Janos, or some other variation of John. This stems from a mistake. In all his public appearances and publications, Mertz signed his name J.K. Mertz. Even his wife wrote his name that way. In 1901, well after his death, his name erroneously appeared in a German musical journal as Johann Kaspar Mertz, and the mistake has persisted to this day. And the only portrait of him, which appears on the cover of all modern editions, is probably not him. his wife had only one photograph, which had faded over time, just like his music. Little is known about his childhood other than the fact that he came from a poor family and was forced as a child to survive on music teaching. The earliest record of a concert he gave in Bratislava dates back to 1834 at an event organized by Hummel, who was one of the most prestigious composers of the time and also a native of Bratislava. It's quite possible that Hummel opened some doors for Mertz, since in 1840 he was already living in Vienna, at a time when the guitar was largely absent from public musical activity. But he managed to make a name for himself as a concert performer and perform in Moravia, Poland, Russia, Berlin, Dresden, and many other places. From 1842 until his death in 1956, he frequently played with his wife, who appears to have been an excellent pianist. In fact, she fell in love with Mertz because of his harmonics. Josephine Mertz is the greatest source of information about her husband through her memoirs and letters. She died 50 years after him in 1903 and published his memoirs in English in 1895. Not only did she play in a duo with her husband, but she also co-composed the piano parts for the guitar and piano duets. Is her version impartial? Josephine says, "The solo piece Les Adieux was played by my late husband so wonderfully and did delight me so much that, as a consequence, I got engaged to him. The harmonic melody provoked the most turbulent ovations because even in the Grand Theatre it was heard like bells even in the most distant corners." Josephine further comments that When he played it in the concert, he aroused such a sensation that the whole audience stood up just to be able to watch his fingers, but he played at such a breakneck speed that one could not know if there were human fingers or billions of worms rushing around on the strings. She also says that when it came to sound quality, he was incomparable, and even when he pulled the strings away from the frets with all his might, his sonority always remained beautiful. Neither the orchestra nor the most powerful piano could overshadow him. Josephine says that Mertz was tall and gentlemanly, slender, not broad-shouldered, 5'7" tall, with light brown hair, a high forehead, lively grey eyes, a delicate moustache, but no beard, and cheeks which remained rosy until his last breath. In 1846, Mertz nearly died from an overdose of strychnine, which had been prescribed for neuralgia. His wife, believing that a larger dose might speed his recovery, nearly killed him by poisoning. Mertz was then 40 years old and took a year to completely recover. Aside from this incident, it seems the marriage was a happy one. Mertz was constantly updated with the latest piano works by composers such as Chopin, Liszt, Mendelssohn, and Thalberg, and they had a great sense of humor as a couple. Josephine narrates that the mind-reading sessions held nowadays remind me that in private gatherings we played similar jokes. I was the medium and had to figure out through music the words or phrases posed during my absence. A piano player or my husband played inconspicuous things from which I had to guess the correct words or phrases. On one occasion, the posed word was in Polish, and I listened with total amazement. After the playing finished, I asked for help because the word did not seem to be German. Everybody hesitated. I asked for a paper and pencil and wrote one letter after the other. Finally, I said that I could not pronounce the word, but there it was. Everyone was amazed, and nobody, neither Johann Strauss or Franz Suppé, nor others, could figure out our joke. What I find significant is the presence of Johann Strauss and von Suppé in the meeting. We don't know if he was Strauss the father or the son. The son was already in his mid-20s by then, and Mertz actually arranged several of his waltzes for the guitar. Von Suppé was a leading operetta producer, still famous today for his light cavalry. These were some of the most prestigious composers in Vienna at the time, and this demonstrates how the Mertz family cultivated beneficial relationships, both socially and musically. There is also an intriguing letter for Chopin, no less, written when he arrived in Vienna in 1829, that is 11 years before Mertz settled in Vienna. Chopin tells his mother that in one day he had met all the best musicians in Vienna, such as so-and-so, so-and-so, and Mertz. This suggests that Mertz had possibly been visiting Vienna since the 1820s, or he may have moved there temporarily due to the persistent flooding of Bratislava. Another source of information about Mertz, of course, is Macarov. If you have listened to our episode on Napoleon Kost, you may well remember that Macarov was a Russian nobleman, a great guitar aficionado, who traveled throughout Europe to hear his heroes live and came to the sad conclusion that outside of Russia, the guitar was in terrible decline. But Macarov was very enthusiastic about Mertz. Initially, he was skeptical. He said, as a performer, Mertz was undoubtedly the best of the German guitarists I had heard. His playing was marked by power, energy, feeling, clarity, and expression. However, he had the defects of the German school, the buzzing of basses, the smothering of very fast passages at times. With respect to the embellishment and polishing of musical phrases and periods, Mertz was not on a par with Gianni Di Ferranti or Leonard Schultz. Macarov created in 1856 an international composition competition intending to revive interest in the guitar. Mertz entered 3 pieces and was crowned the winner, but he died before the result was even announced. And then Kost was then awarded the title of the greatest living composer of guitar music, a fair result in my opinion. Says Macarov, I felt like Columbus discovering a new America, for he was the great guitar composer I had long given up hope of finding. I had been searching for him everywhere among the countless pieces of music I bought throughout Russia and Europe. Afterwards, I had thrown them away in despair, finding them worthless rubbish cooked up by talentless modern composers such as Padovets, Carcassi, Bobrovich, Sussman, Küffner, and Petoletti. In contrast, the music played by Mertz, to which I listened with ever-growing rapture, contained everything: rich composition, great musical knowledge, excellent development of the ideas, unity, novelty, grandeur of style, absence of trivial expression, and multiplicity of harmonic effects. At the same time, there was the clear basic melody which kept surging above the surface of arpeggios and chords. The effects were brilliant and daring, Basic to all this, he had a deep understanding of the instrument with all its possibilities and hidden secrets. In his full-hearted compositions, I liked the finale's introductions especially well because they were unusual and were wonderfully developed. They could be removed from the rest and played separately without losing their power and musical significance. Thus, they could give full satisfaction to any listener. In any case, his health never fully recovered, and he died at the age of 50 in 1856. It's astonishing that he survived as a guitarist during a time of the instrument's sharpest decline in popularity, yet his work did not survive into the next generation, or during the birth of the concert guitar in the 20th century. Neither Tárrega or Llobet or Segovia or Barrios Yepes or John Williams adopt Mertz's works. I myself learn of their existence in collections published by Isaías Savio in South America, but I was unaware of the existence of major concert works. There are two recordings that were instrumental in their rediscovery. First, Dave Leisner's The Viennese Guitar in 1980. This is Dave Leisner playing Mertz. In 1987, Dave Russell recorded a much admired album that had a huge circulation, 19th Century Guitar, containing the two works that would become Mertz's most popular, the Hungarian Fantasy and the Elegy. This is Dave Russell playing Mertz. By the way, you can listen to all these pieces in the playlist that we have carefully selected for you, which you can access in the description of this episode. In recent years, a profusion of recordings of his works have appeared, including his works for guitar duo or guitar and piano. One of the most interesting is this one on period guitars, a 7-string Rudloff and an 8-string Mertz, beautifully played by Rafaela Smits. It's not easy to find one's way through Mertz's works. It's very profuse, varied, and uneven. This has led many guitarists to maintain works of somewhat questionable quality in their repertoire. One that seems to be very well received, though, is his Opus 13, Bardenklänge, or Bardic Songs. These are characteristic pieces of modern difficulty that seem to respond to the most popular composer of his time, as the titles suggest. Some of them seem to nod to Beethoven, like to the Distant Beloved, while others are clearly inspired by Schumann, Chopin, or Mendelssohn, like Song Without Words or Fingal's Cave. That is Mertz's contribution to the cult of Ossian, a fraudulent bard who dominated the imagination of several Romantic composers. We are listening to Fingal's Cave by Josef Kaspar Mertz. Mertz composed lots of collections like this, as well as collections of dances such as Ländler and waltzes. He wrote no works in sonata form. In this, he's like Kost, un enfant du siècle. The vast majority of his works are in the form of fantasias, where a long introduction displays a flurry of instrumental effects that illustrate contrasting atmospheres, the theatrical virtuosity of early Romanticism. These are followed by a main section that can be a rondo or a dance form. These were the works that generated the greatest excitement in the 19th century, but they have become more dated and are almost unknown today, unfairly in many cases. of his works are also a form of medley or potpourri of themes taken from successful operas of his time. In this, he often hits the nail on the head and manages to create a clear sense of theatrical action. Few people realize that his greatest work is actually Opus 8, the Open Review. It's no less than 33 fantasies or medleys from famous operas ranging surprisingly from Mozart to Wagner. These works open up a wide space for the performer's creativity and contribution. I have recorded one of them based on Donizetti's Lucia di Lammermoor. This is Open Review, Lucia di Lammermoor by Mertz, played by myself, and you can listen to the full track on our playlist that is accessible through the link in the description of this episode. Another immensely popular work today is the collection of 6 transcriptions of Schubert songs published in 1845. At that time, there was much interest in Schubert's songs, and he was gradually becoming recognized as the greatest song composer in German. Liszt transcribed no less than 56 of them between 1833 and 1846. These works are a landmark in the art of transcription, addressing the challenge of giving the piano sustained voice with tessitura, cantabile, and a narrative quality. Mertz was almost certainly inspired by Liszt in his selection, as some of these transcriptions adopt ideas that had already appeared in Liszt's works in the previous decade, such as the canonical treatment of the famous serenade or stanchion. This is Schubert's stanchion transcribed by Mertz. As I have said earlier about cost, it's difficult to appreciate Mertz without trying to transcend the 19th century way of thinking, listening, and reacting to emotion. These works have become dated because their emotional universe doesn't really resonate with the more denotative sensibility of the 21st century. There is a serious compositional problem. As Macarov accounts show, his audience was impressed by the grandeur of style and multiplicity of effects. Today, the grandeur seems very suspect and the effects are no longer novel. But precisely because of the desire to theatricalize the discourse, they occupy a disproportionate space. Even a beautiful piece like the Elegy is 70% introduction and only 30% of what really matters. Instead of developing the truly beautiful central melody, the only formal idea that occurs to him is to repeat everything. This is Mertz's Elegy. Still, his music emanates a quality that is difficult to define and explain. Everything seems genuine and sincere. There's no desire to impress at any cost. There is a deep sensitivity he wants to share, and this secures his place as one of the greatest composers in guitar history. We hope you have enjoyed this episode, and we want to thank Henrique Caldas for the technical works. Please stay with us and listen to the next episode. Guitar Co-op Podcasts. Great composers. Conceived and presented by Fabio Zanon.